Alright, so I think we are now live, which now means, of course I'm live without the second screen though. Alright, so now we're actually live with the second screen. Alright, so basically this was a result of a usability study where we asked people to write a JSON document or the contents thereof in a pre-printed form to a given JSON writer. And so people tried various ways how they can call the right APIs, and it was very clear that they were somewhat confused by what we offered and where we offered it. And so Afsan made a proposal on how to simplify this. So one of the things we stumbled upon when we looked at XML, for example, was basically how do we name those guys? Because in XML land, basically everything is called write to, which is generally the way the framework does things, because you call things write on the writer and you call it write to on something that writes to something else, which in this case would mean we would just have a write to method. Then the other thing is we have various ways we can write things. We have individual values, we have individual properties, and so there was some inconsistency where things are. So he basically has two proposals. So first one is we would add additional write methods to property and documents, so we can actually write them individually as well. And then the B part is basically update the element on the APIs and JSON element to follow this write to terminology, and then basically within that proposal he has one sub proposal, which is can't we just get rid of all of those and just have write to methods on all three elements, and then you can all write them individually to the writer. And so then the only scenario that you're effectively losing by having a single API call is the one where you write a property under a new name. The way you would do that is you would basically just call the writer, you would call write, I forgot what the name is, but write name or something, or write property name, and then you would call the write to API on the JSON element that represents the value of the property.
Which is also the same.
So you'd make two calls instead of one.
Correct, and it's not just. It might be less discoverable, so that's something that we haven't validated with the in the usability study, but. What I find appealing about the option 2 in the B thing is that everything has just a single write to method, and it looks very consistent to me. And actually, I have to say I like that quite a bit.
Can you scroll up again, Emo, to show what we currently have?
That's what we currently have. So this is the only APIs we have. So we have nothing on property, and we have nothing on JSON document.
I see. So today you're already making two calls to do what you were just describing. No?
No, you would call JSON element write property, and then you would just pass in the name you wanna write it under.
Oh, you substitute a different name via the first argument.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see.
But what is also clear is that people didn't figure out how they can write a JSON property, because they didn't figure out that they can basically, call write property on the JSON element and then pass in the stuff there. Right? So
is this the sum total of all on the whole sort of DOM? Is this all of the APIs that take a UTF-8 JSON writer?
I believe that is correct. Yes.
There's something very nice about getting rid of the methods that take something else before the writer.
So in things that Ahsan and I discussed, there's changing the. If we keep the write property, so part B1 is make it write as property 2, and then another part of it is flip the writer and the property name. So the writer, because write to arg0 should always be the thing that gets modified via side effect. And but with the proposal of JSON document only having write to, JSON document is just JSON element at the root. So if we don't want to add all the write property overloads to JSON document, we should just remove them from JSON element. And then the model is everything writes as its natural type. Document is a value, element is a value, property writes as a property with its name at its value. And if you want to write document or element as a property, you call write property name on the writer first.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Can you scroll down to the sample before and after?
Yes. I get my mouse back.
certainly looks cleaner and more discoverable.
Yeah, I think the second one is basically what you would intuitively assume you could do, and that's also what you can do on XML document. I mean, the only thing that XML has that we don't have is this notion of inner and outer XML, but they basically have write to and they have write to inner, I believe. But like the mechanics are pretty much the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I might try if I were a user would be writer.write doc. But from a layering perspective, I totally understand why we don't want that. And so the second thing I would try would be reversing it, and then I would do doc.write. Oh, write to writer. Okay, done.
Yeah, maybe I'm biased. I just know from XML that the writer doesn't know about the DOM, but the DOM knows about the writer. So that's I mean, that's how most things are layered. So
right.
I think that's kind of also what people would intuitively expect. Right, so that means nobody seems to have a dissenting view. Then the question more like is what of the buffet of options are we going to do with? Are we going?
I like A plus B2.
Yeah, I agree with that. So that means let me actually open this guy in my own browser tab here, so I can actually type this like without looking at the other screen.
It's like barely unanimous.
Well, it's also a small group, which helps. Yeah, so
and as far as I know, Assan's last opinion was based on things he doodled on my whiteboard, crossing out right as prime.
So somebody's asking, can we instead add write methods on UTF-JSON writer? And we said we don't want this for layering writer.
Some of us don't.
All right, so that makes the API approved. So now it's just a function of like who's going to do it, but yeah, that one will be me. But like today, I think I talked with Dan yesterday. We'll figure out what the process is. I suppose it's just an email to Tactics.
There's a community member who has already started.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty straightforward coding-wise. All right, so this is the writer on reader completed. So I pinged Fowler because I wasn't clear what he specifically wanted. Do you know what he wanted to do?
I think I generally remember. So we implemented these adapters, right? The stream pipe reader, stream pipe writer, and then the pipe to stream adapters. And what we realized is that if you are trying to implement on reader completed, it's really hard to do two things. One is know whether or not the method is actually going to do anything. So for example, like if you don't have the default pipe implementation, if you call on reader completed with some func, like that thing may never be invoked at all.
Okay.
Actually, I think that was the primary reason. And so like one idea he had is maybe like you pass in a bool, like whether or like some sort of capability that says like whether or not this function will ever be called or not. And then I think you just kind of realize this function is completely unnecessary. And that part I'm not as certain about. This is like why removing it versus. I'm trying to see if he's actually here or not.
Well, it's also abstract, so that would mean in order for us to deprecate it, you would have to tell people what else would you do.
Just make it virtual no.
We would have to make it at least virtual and make it do nothing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my care level for those kind of things is mildly low because we haven't really figured out what the best story for this is. I mean, it's another question of what deprecation in his mind means because the simplest we just basically do an obsolete plus make it virtual.
Yeah.
But then the question is that what he wants? And then the question is, what's the message going to say? Like,
Yeah.
just don't do it, or do something else, or like, what's the guidance effectively?
Yeah.
And in general, like 3.0 is, I think, the best time frame to do things like that because I wouldn't do it at 3.1. Like, if he really wants to do it, then the next opportunity is 5.0.
Yeah, I don't have too much opinion on this, like whether or not we should do it or not.
Right.
I would say like, hey,
No, that's the
didn't
wrong
really
one.
have a. We're okay with doing this change, but like a little more justification maybe.
Right, so that one is this one, and then we are left with this one.
Yeah, I think forward.
So I'm pretty sure we talked about this before in some other context. I think in general, I think that makes sense to me because buffer sizes are definitely things that we know we want to tweak.
Yeah.
Using -1 makes sense. I think the last proposal was somebody said, well, we could make it 0, but 0 would have meaning. I mean, to me, -1 makes the most sense because it's very clearly not the buffer size.
Yeah, and as long if we don't want to make it nullable, that's the best option, I would say. If that's the pattern across our stack is -1 by implementation specific value, then
when 0 is not itself.
yeah, 0 here would be valid. Do you mind looking at the stream pipe reader and stream pipe writer options to see if there's a buffer size on that?
Because if 0 has no sensible meaning, then 0 would.
Yeah.
So this is the stream. Is that the one?
Yeah, it has a buffer size on it. So maybe see what that is by default.
So does the constructor have a default?
I think it's probably 4096 or something like that. So I think we should do the same with these ones.
So we have these guys as well.
Yeah. You should consider doing it with the minimum read size too.
So we only have pipe reader stream pipe reader options. I guess we don't only have pipe reader options by itself.
Yeah. Do we have a -1 constant for like default buffers? Like, do we have a default buffer size constant anywhere? Like, we have timespan.infinite, which is -1.
Yeah.
I don't believe we do.
We've used buffer constants in a few places to be -1. I think like the Stream APIs use it as well.
I mean, is it public?
The fact that it's -1?
So do we have a public const or public static read only that represents default buffer size?
No, we've just used -1 inline.
To make sure I understand, these options are specifically for the stream pipe reader and pipe writer. The pipe one is not this case because there's pipe options, right?
Didn't look like it, but I mean, yeah, this one.
It looks like we have.
What did we do here? Same thing.
We have constants there too, so I mean, if the idea is just to make it so it's -1 everywhere, instead of having like even buffer size, these are effectively just byte thresholds, right? Or the pause and resume thresholds. So I guess let's use -1 again there, and then in like a remark say like what the default value is currently.
I'm surprised with that because I thought we reviewed this and I thought we made a decision.
Okay.
But I mean, I might be wrong. Does anybody else remember something here, or is it just me and my?
This was before mine.
Jeremy, maybe. Like I think it came up before, and I don't know, and it might have been the pipe options thing, but I'm positive we talked about this.
I think we talked about it, and we said, Tanner, can you go up in a separate issue? As we were discussing another issue that
Right.
this got raised, Tanner opened an issue, and we're now looking at it.
Yeah.
So we probably discussed this somewhere around May 28th.
Yeah.
That might be possible.
Yeah, because I opened it day of.
And my guess is that this applies to both types of options, the pipe options and
Yeah,
also the
I would
stream
agree
pipe
with
ones, reader and writer options.
Right.
That should be pretty.
Yeah, this is basically just applying to whatever we've changed the API to
Yeah.
from what the original was.
So when you guys specify -1, do you put in like a remark saying like what the current default is?
I don't think we've done that
Okay.
before.
So like
because
when-
we don't want people to become dependent on whatever particular value. If they want something, then they should explicitly set it based
Okay.
on their own profiling data.
Okay.
And otherwise, we'll do whatever we think is the correct default.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm pretty sure we document the default we use, though.
And then
I might be wrong, but I'm pretty
They
sure.
might be
so.
somewhere in the remarks section, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, you can also generally ask. So, for example, you can new up a buffer stream and ask what its buffer size is, right?
Right.
So you can discover at runtime at least what the value
I
is.
see.
In which case would be the same here, I guess. If you pass in pipe options new,
can get-
I would not expect these values to be -1 in the options. I would expect them to have their actual default.
I see.
Right, yeah.
In which case, if you really want to log it or do something with that, or
Okay.
because otherwise it's very impossible for you to. I mean, how would you even profile if you cannot plot on a graph?
Right.
Like that seems
So-
weird.
Now I'll ask this as a proposal of should we do it at the same time? Should we add a constant buffer.default buffer size -1 so we don't have to discuss should it be -1 or 0 ever again in the future?
To me, honestly, like
Where would that live, though?
Yeah, that's
Buffer, like we have a class called buffer. But buffer.default buffer size.
System buffers buffer?
Well, no, it's system buffer. Buffer.block copy, that buffer.
I thought
mean,
that was under the buffers namespace.
No, buffers is just memory, I think.
And I wouldn't be opposed to it, but at the same time, it seems a little bit over the top because I would say
Yeah.
that -1 is kind of like a. I don't think anybody will be surprised by what -1 means in this context.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
we definitely shouldn't do that now because that has very broad implications. There are places where you pass -1 and it will blow up, like file streams buffer size.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and I think there's some places where we've said it's okay to use 0 and it's preferred to use 0 when 0 doesn't have explicit meaning because 0 is cheaper to use.
Right, but here we were saying 0 doesn't have explicit meaning, but we're saying use -1.
Right. I think 0 would be fine if we say it doesn't have any explicit meaning and won't ever have explicit meaning for type options.
The only thing 0 could mean is don't buffer.
Right, which could be something that you want in some cases. So
No. Like
Well,
the buffer size here. Well, I get anything.
yeah, there's always like constrained memory scenarios where someone might want to say don't buffer,
Yeah, but I mean, the question
do
is,
it immediately.
Is this number an actual number or is this number a hint? Because if it's used for something like a
Yeah.
REPL, it's a hint.
So when sometimes it's used for when you call pipe pipewriter.getMemory and you pass in 0 there. That's just a hint. So it will get some buffer that's larger than 0 no matter what.
I think in general, -1 tends to be safer because you can't have a negative array size, and so,
Okay.
yeah. And it gives the option for if for some reason a customer in the future says, "Oh, we need no buffering or anything like that," you can use 0 to specify that, rather than like -2.
Fair enough. I guess my question, I mean, the idea behind having a named constant for this is that going forward we have an easy answer of if we're defining anything that takes a buffer size. Like we are saying we now have platform guidance, take -1 to mean I, the caller, do not care. You do whatever you think is best.
I think that'd probably be good, but maybe we should have a separate API proposal for that and review it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily a widely known concept that -1 means
Mhm.
Right. All right. So that means to me, this is basically what we just discussed. If anybody has dissenting opinions, now is your time. Otherwise, we do that.
Cool.
Yeah, Ben Adams was just asking. Going to make stream default copy buffer size public thing. Yeah, he's also suggesting doing overloads, but this is one of those things where I think overloads are actually not working really well because you end up with this combinatoric explosions of what you do, and given that they're all longs or all ins, it's like, well, if you only want to specify one of the three, like how would you even design overloads for that?
Yeah, I think in general it's way better to just use -1 because it's cheap to construct. You just not a 0.
Yep.
And it's cheap to compare because it's just less than 0. So
Right.
it's basically the cheapest way that isn't taking up 0 to say, let's use the default value.
Right.
And unlike a constant value that's inline, we won't end up hurting downstream consumers if we decide to change it later, and they've already compiled with the constant.
Yeah. I mean, in practice, we have seen breaks where we change buffer sizes, but I
Right.
think on core, I would say that's in the realm of what you would have to absorb. I mean,
Right. And we need to be able to target what's best for what we've determined to be the common use case. And if someone else has something more specialized, they can always customize it themselves.
right. Great. So then that's pretty much all I had for today. Does anybody else anything else? Otherwise, that's it. And I will probably set up another meeting for. Actually, let me push this API back to API needs work here. So it disappears from my radar. And then I think the one thing we need to do is the WinForms request for the task dialog thingy. But that is actually quite a lot of API surface, so I haven't done it yet because you probably need full 2 hours to actually go over that. Plus, you also want to have the contributor on the call. So I will set this up for as soon as we can. Is there anything else that's coming still for 3.0, Jeremy? Do you know anything in your area? I think you had a proposal, but I mean that's pretty much approved, right? So,
That's basically approved. I was planning on marking it approved today, but that's also for 5.0, and it's to unblock
that's right.
it's to unblock the ARM folks from being able to work on it starting after the snap.
that's good.
So there was an API proposal that I brought up months ago for, did we want a way of getting a memory back from like the part where we have span, read-only span, memory, read-only
Right.
memory, and the lower thing. And Tanner, I think you were going to see if ML.NET was having to do a lot of work to work around that. I don't think we ever heard back on that.
Right. They aren't now because of the limited use of span on full framework, and they're still targeting full framework as their primary. So it may be more of a concern when they start using span and memory more.
Okay. So
And they
it's back to the conclusion we had before of it may be useful, but we don't have enough demand for it now, so we'll hold
Right.
off until we have demand.
Right. We have about 40 open issues in the future milestone, so unless somebody pushes back, I would just suggest like whatever the next review cycle is, we just going over those.
I've got a few that people keep asking me, can we start working on these yet?
They can, they just can't open a pull request.
Well, yeah, and they want to open the pull request. That way they can start consuming them.
All right, then this is for today. Then let me end the call in a meaningful way, and then see you guys next week.
Hey, Emo, the